The document hit my desk with a sound that seemed louder than it should have been. Todd Brennan sat across from me, hands folded, eyes fixed somewhere past my shoulder. Not on my face. Never on my face anymore. "Performance improvement plan," he said, pushing the stapled pages closer. "We need to address some concerns." My throat tightened. I pulled the document toward me, scanning the words that seemed designed to cut. Inconsistent results. Missed targets. Below standard execution. Each line felt like a blade, precise and cold. My hands trembled slightly as I held the paper. Those numbers listed as failures were mine. I had built them from nothing. I had worked weekends and late nights for them while Todd left at 4:30 every Friday. Human Resources sat beside him, a woman named Patricia who kept her expression carefully neutral. Her pen moved across a notepad, recording everything. Recording my silence. Recording what they probably thought was guilt. I understood then, with sudden clarity, that this meeting wasn't about improvement. It was about removal. Todd continued talking, his voice steady and rehearsed. He mentioned leadership concerns. He referenced documented patterns. He used phrases like moving forward and clear expectations that sounded reasonable but meant something else entirely. My ears felt hot. My vision narrowed to the paper in front of me, to the numbers that had been twisted into weapons against me. I wanted to speak, to interrupt, to point at the signature lines he'd signed himself, approving every single projection that was now being called inadequate. But something stopped me. Not fear exactly. Something colder. Something that felt like understanding settling into my bones. Todd wasn't building a case against my work. He was building a case against me. There was a difference, and it mattered. Patricia's pen kept moving, scratching notes that would become part of my permanent record. Notes that would follow me if I wasn't careful. Notes that would define me if I didn't act. I pressed my fingernails into my palm beneath the desk, focusing on that small pain to keep myself steady. They both stopped talking. The silence stretched between us, heavy and expectant. This was the moment they anticipated: tears, or anger, or desperate explanations about how hard I'd been working, how much I'd sacrificed, how unfair this all was. I could feel them waiting for me to break. My nails dug deeper into my palm. I took a slow breath through my nose, keeping my face still. "I understand," I said quietly. Relief washed over Todd's face so quickly he couldn't hide it. He thought my calm meant surrender. He thought my quietness meant defeat. He leaned back slightly in his chair, shoulders relaxing. Patricia closed her notebook. The meeting apparently concluded in her mind. They had no idea what I was actually thinking. No idea what I'd already seen. No idea what I'd been quietly collecting for the past 8 weeks. That was their mistake. The first of many they would make before this was finished. My name is Catherine Wells, and before that morning in Todd's office, I had never received a written complaint about my performance. Not once in 7 years across 2 companies. Not a single documented concern. My reviews had always been solid. Sometimes better than solid. I had recommendation letters. I had thank you emails from clients. I had data that proved my value. Until 15 months ago, I had been on track for a senior position. Everyone said so. My peers congratulated me in advance. My mentor told me it was basically decided. Then Todd Brennan transferred into our division as the new regional manager. Within 3 months, everything changed. Praise stopped. The feedback became vague and critical. The opportunities dried up. First, I thought I was imagining it. Then I thought maybe I really was underperforming somehow. Then I stopped thinking and started watching. 15 months earlier, our sales division had been struggling badly. Targets were missed 3 quarters in a row. Forecasts were unreliable. Client relationships were fractured. Leadership was openly worried about the entire region's future. I volunteered to help stabilize things. Nobody else wanted the assignment because it looked like career suicide. If the division failed, whoever touched it last would take the blame. I rebuilt the client pipeline from scratch. I corrected the forecasting models that had been producing garbage data for months. I personally called 17 clients who were threatening to leave and convinced 16 of them to stay. Every recovery meeting, every saved contract, every rebuilt relationship came through my work. I sent the updates. I drafted the reports. I made the calls. Todd's name went on the final presentations. His name appeared in the leadership summaries. His name got mentioned in company newsletters when the division recovered. Mine appeared in the footer, listed under contributors, along with 3 other people who'd done far less. I found out about Todd's promotion plans accidentally. A calendar notification popped up on my screen one afternoon. Meant for someone else. Leadership review meeting. Attendees included Todd and 3 executives. The subject line read, Brennan Advancement Discussion. I stared at that notification for a long time before dismissing it. Something cold settled in my stomach. Todd was being considered for vice president. The promotion would be announced in 3 months. It was practically guaranteed, according to the office gossip that followed. Suddenly everything made sense. Every strange interaction. Every shifted goal. Every vague criticism. He didn't need my performance to improve. He needed it to look bad. Because if he was promoted based on the division's recovery, he couldn't have someone beneath him who could credibly claim they'd done most of the actual work. He needed a clean narrative. And I was in the way of that narrative. The shift in Todd's behavior had been gradual but unmistakable once I knew to look for it. His feedback changed from specific to uselessly vague. He stopped asking questions about my projects. He approved things quickly, almost carelessly. Looks fine, he'd write in emails. Go ahead. Approved. Always brief. Always documented. Always creating a paper trail that showed him overseeing my work but never engaging with the details. He started copying leadership on random emails, the kind you normally wouldn't escalate. Small questions. Minor updates. Nothing important, but it created an impression. An impression that I needed more oversight than I actually did. In meetings, he would let me finish presenting, then reframe my conclusions slightly as if correcting me. The corrections were meaningless, but they established hierarchy in front of others. They made it look like I needed guidance. I started noticing his patterns. The way he positioned himself. The language he chose. Everything designed to slowly, steadily diminish my credibility while building his own. One morning I arrived to find my system access had changed. Nothing major at first. Just one analytics dashboard I could no longer open. When I asked about it, Todd said it was a security update. Standard procedure. 2 weeks later, another dashboard disappeared from my permissions. Then access to certain client files became restricted. Each time there was a reasonable explanation. System upgrades. Departmental reorganization. Nothing to worry about. I didn't complain. Instead, I exported everything I could while I still had access. Every report. Every approval. Every revenue projection. Every email chain. I organized them by date in folders on my personal encrypted drive. If Todd wanted to build a case against me, I would build my own case. Better one. One made of documents he'd already signed. The performance improvement plan started 3 months before the meeting in Todd's office. They called it developmental support, not punishment. Weekly check-ins to discuss goals. Metrics that seemed to shift every few weeks. Targets that changed mid-quarter without clear explanation. I attended every meeting on time. Took notes. I asked clarifying questions that Patricia from HR recorded as evidence of my engagement. I nodded when Todd explained new expectations. I agreed to timelines that seemed designed to be impossible. Inside, I was documenting everything. Every changed goal. Every shifted deadline. Every inconsistency between what was said in meetings and what appeared in follow-up emails. I kept my own notes, time-stamped and detailed, stored safely outside company systems. If they were building a narrative, I was building a timeline. And timelines don't lie. The revenue logs were the key to everything. Every forecast override, every projection adjustment, every target revision carried a digital signature. Name. Timestamp. An approval trail that couldn't be erased. Todd's name appeared again and again. He had approved every single number that was now being used against me. Every projection he was calling unrealistic, he had signed off on. Every target he claimed I'd missed, he had agreed to in writing. The system kept records automatically. Most people forgot that. Most people assumed emails and chats were the only paper trail. But approvals lived in databases, archived and searchable. I pulled every log from the past 15 months. I organized them chronologically. I matched them against the criticism in my performance plan. The contradiction was absolute and undeniable. Todd's confidence grew as the weeks passed. In team meetings, he spoke about the division's success as if it had been entirely his strategy. Under my leadership, he would say, and people believed him. I watched colleagues nod along. I watched them credit him with decisions I had made. I watched my own work become invisible in real time, absorbed into his narrative. Part of me wanted to correct the record right then. To raise my hand and say, actually, I built that. Actually, I saved those clients. Actually, those were my forecasts. But I didn't. Because truth without timing is just noise. And I was waiting for the right moment. The moment when it would matter most. The moment when the audience would be listening. Patricia from HR scheduled another meeting. Leadership would attend this time. My performance plan review, she called it. An opportunity to discuss progress and next steps. The email had a polite, professional tone that didn't match what it actually meant. This was escalation. They were moving to the next phase, whatever that was. My pulse stayed steady as I read the meeting invitation. This wasn't something to fear. This was exactly where it needed to go. The higher up the chain this went, the more people would see what I was about to show them. I accepted the meeting invitation without comment. The strangest part was that no one asked the obvious question. No one looked at the performance complaints and said who approved these numbers originally. No one wondered why projections approved by management were now being called unrealistic. They accepted the story they were given because it was simpler than digging deeper. Because questioning it would mean questioning Todd. And Todd was about to be promoted. People don't usually investigate someone on their way up. But that assumption was their weakness. They thought the story was complete. They thought all the relevant information was in the room. It wasn't. I wrote the email at midnight 3 days before the leadership meeting. My apartment was quiet. Just the sound of my keyboard and the hum of the refrigerator. I drafted every word carefully, attaching documents one by one. Then I read it through twice. And closed it without sending. Not yet. Timing mattered. If I sent it too early, they would have time to prepare counter-explanations. If I sent it too late, decisions might already be made. I needed them to go into that meeting confident. I needed them to believe their narrative was solid. I needed Todd to feel safe. Only then would the truth land with full force. Todd's promotion presentation appeared on the company calendar. Executive leadership meeting 3 days away. The timing aligned perfectly with my performance review escalation. I stared at that calendar entry for several minutes, watching the cursor blink on my screen. Everything was converging. His rise and my removal, orchestrated to happen simultaneously. Clean and efficient. He would be promoted based partly on the division's recovery. I would be managed out quietly, my role eliminated or restructured. The narrative would be complete. Todd the successful leader. Catherine the underperformer who couldn't keep up. Except that wasn't what the documents said. And documents don't have loyalty. They don't have ambition. They just exist, timestamp after timestamp, signature after signature, telling the truth whether anyone wants to hear it or not. I opened my draft email again. The subject line took me 20 minutes to write. It needed to be professional but clear. Neutral but compelling enough that people would actually open it. Performance documentation, supporting materials. I addressed it carefully. Finance leadership because they cared about numbers. HR leadership because they cared about process. Division executives because they needed to know what was being done in their name. I attached the revenue logs first. Every approval Todd had signed. Then the timeline I'd built showing when targets were set versus when they were called failures. Then the email chain showing my work on the division recovery. Last, I attached Todd's own words. Emails praising my work from the early months, before the narrative shifted. His signature on my last positive review. His approval on initiatives he was now claiming were poorly executed. I reread the email one final time. Then I moved my cursor to the send button. My finger hovered over the mouse for 3 seconds that felt longer. This would change everything. There would be no going back after this. No quiet exit. No polite resignation. This was confrontation. Documented and undeniable. Clicked send. The email disappeared from my draft folder. A moment later, the sent confirmation appeared. I closed my laptop and sat in the darkness of my apartment, waiting. Not nervously. Not anxiously. Just waiting the way you wait for something inevitable. The response was silence. Complete silence. No reply emails. No meeting invitations. No phone calls. For 2 days, nothing. But it was the kind of silence that means something. The kind that means people are reading very carefully. The kind that means conversations are happening in rooms I'm not in. Questions are being asked that don't have good answers. Patricia from HR didn't send her usual check-in email. Todd didn't respond to a routine question I'd sent him about a client file. The silence was thick and deliberate. On the 3rd day, I checked the company calendar. Todd's promotion presentation had been removed. No reschedule. Just gone. My phone buzzed 10 minutes later. Patricia from HR. Meeting request for the following morning. Just her. No Todd. Patricia asked me to explain the documentation. She had printed everything, the pages spread across the table between us. Revenue logs highlighted in yellow. Email chains marked with sticky notes. Timeline comparisons underlined in red. These approvals, she said, pointing to Todd's signatures. These are all accurate. Yes, I replied. They're pulled directly from the system. She nodded slowly, making notes. She asked about dates, about processes, about who was in which meetings. I answered each question calmly, referencing specific documents. She didn't ask about my feelings. She didn't ask if I felt targeted. She asked only about facts, and I gave her facts. Numbers. Signatures. Things that couldn't be argued with. After 40 minutes, she closed her folder. Thank you, she said. This is helpful. I nodded and left. I didn't ask what would happen next. I already knew something had shifted. They called Todd in the next day. I wasn't there, but I heard about it later from someone who was. They asked him to explain the discrepancy between the approvals and the performance complaints. He tried. He said the projections had been ambitious but achievable. He said I hadn't executed properly. He said the context was more complex than documents could show. But every explanation he offered contradicted something in the logs. The dates didn't align with his version. The numbers didn't support his claims. His own signatures kept appearing where they shouldn't be if his story was true. Someone asked why he'd approved targets he now considered unrealistic. He said he'd trusted my judgment at the time. Someone asked why that trust disappeared so suddenly. He didn't have a clear answer. The meeting ended without resolution. But something had broken in the narrative he'd built. The confidence was gone. By Friday afternoon, things moved quickly. Todd's promotion was officially withdrawn. The announcement came in a brief email from leadership. After careful consideration of division needs and strategic priorities, we have decided to postpone leadership changes in the regional structure. Postpone meant cancel. Everyone knew it. Within an hour, the office was buzzing with speculation. By Monday morning, Todd was no longer managing anyone. His title didn't change officially, but his responsibilities did. Projects were reassigned. Direct reports were moved to other managers. No public announcement. No explanation. Just a quiet reorganization that left him sidelined. I received an email from finance leadership requesting a meeting. They wanted to discuss the division's forecasting process and my role in developing it. The tone was respectful, interested. Nothing like the performance improvement plan language. The leadership meeting felt different from every interaction I'd had in the past 4 months. They asked questions about my methodology. They wanted to understand the client recovery process. They took notes on my responses. One executive asked directly, "Why didn't you raise concerns about the performance plan earlier?" I chose my words carefully. I wanted to be certain about what I was seeing. Documentation takes time to gather properly. She nodded. Another executive asked, "What would you need to feel confident continuing in this role?" I hadn't expected that question. Took a breath. Honestly, I'm not sure I want to continue here. The room went quiet. They asked me to clarify. I explained that trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild. That I'd spent months watching my work being rewritten while building a case to defend my own competence. They listened. They asked what it would take. I told them I'd need to think about it. I spent the weekend thinking. Not about Todd or the performance plan or the drama of the past months. I thought about what I actually wanted. Did I want an apology? Not really. Apologies don't undo months of stress. Did I want Todd fired? That felt petty. Did I want recognition? Partly, but recognition from people who'd been willing to believe I was failing didn't mean much anymore. What I wanted was distance. Clean break. A chance to work somewhere that didn't require me to defend my own competence with spreadsheets and timestamps. Monday morning, I reached out to a recruiter I'd worked with years ago. By Wednesday, I had 3 interviews scheduled. By the following Monday, I had an offer. Senior analyst position. Different company. Better title. 20% salary increase. I accepted without negotiating. I gave my notice 2 weeks later. Patricia processed my resignation without the usual attempts to convince me to stay. Leadership sent polite emails thanking me for my contributions. A few colleagues took me to lunch, asking careful questions about what happened. I kept my answers professional. No drama. No accusations. Just a simple explanation that I'd found an opportunity that was a better fit. Todd and I never spoke directly again. He didn't attend my farewell gathering. He didn't send a goodbye email. The silence felt appropriate somehow. There was nothing left to say. My last day was quiet. I packed my desk, returned my badge, and walked out to my car in the late afternoon sun. I didn't feel triumphant exactly. Felt relieved. Free. Like something heavy had been lifted. 6 months later, I heard through former colleagues that Todd had left the company. No details. Just gone one day. His departure handled quietly like his demotion had been. I didn't ask for more information. It didn't matter anymore. That chapter was closed. I was building something new now. Somewhere that valued documentation and truth. Somewhere that hadn't required me to prove my own worth with signed receipts. I learned something permanent from those 15 months. Something about silence and timing. About documentation and patience. About the difference between defending yourself loudly and letting the truth speak in signatures and timestamps. You don't have to shout. You don't have to argue. You don't have to beg people to believe you. Sometimes all you have to do is wait for the right moment. Then present the truth in their own handwriting. In their own signatures. In their own words. And let them explain the contradiction. Because documents don't get nervous. They don't misremember. They don't change their story under pressure. They just exist, stubborn and permanent, telling the truth whether anyone wants to hear it or not. That's the power of paper, of archives, of records kept carefully in the moment when everyone else assumed the story was already written. The power of knowing that today's signatures become tomorrow's evidence. That approval granted carelessly becomes accountability assigned precisely. Todd thought my silence meant surrender. He thought my calm meant defeat. He thought documentation was just paperwork, forgettable and irrelevant. He was wrong about all of it. And by the time he understood that, the truth was already in motion. Timestamp. Undeniable.